Welcome to War Blog. Today I'm looking at the West Adveeka scenario. It's an interesting scenario because I've actually got a tall screen. I could record it on there, but probably wouldn't work for YouTube that well. But essentially, I didn't really build it specifically like this, but it was something that fits in exactly as to what I was sort of thinking. Essentially, I was reading just the other day. I sort of Googled the spring offensive, Ukraine's spring offensive failed or something like that, because I haven't looked these things up for a while. And it appears that they're now acknowledging that, properly across the board, obviously. And some people are sort of writing up, and there was something about, the New York Times did sort of 10 reasons why it failed, and someone was doing some analysis of that report or something. It was interesting reading, but I think at the end of it, well, this might have been actually in a South Front thing. I wish I could actually find that. I doubt I've got it anywhere. It doesn't matter. I mean, the point is, the point is that I wonder where this is recording from. Be interesting to know. The point is that it was saying that now that the Ukrainians have been pushed out of Adveeka, that they don't have any sort of ready defences to fall back on, and sort of Adveeka was a sort of like a natural defensive position, and outside of that, there's no sort of like concrete fortifications, no sort of well developed entrenchments. There's no suitable. They haven't even laid mines, and I think that this scenario sort of reflect. I've designed it to sort of reflect that, but I mean, I just used it from an existing current map, and I do want to actually start doing more of these. I feel really bad about having let it lapse for so long. I sort of blame them not doing much on it because I haven't really missed much. But there's certainly been some things in Syria that have happened, and especially in the Maya, wherever it is, the Mayania area, and other places. I've just been, but the thing I'm just so busy. But the point is that there's nowhere for them to fall back on. So what we got here is you've got all these irregular units, and they're going to defend well in these built-up areas. I couldn't find any roads on this map because it's a bit high level. Presumably there's some roads, but they're probably all blown up, so make their own roads. But it's all fields, so there's nowhere to hide. They'll be able to hide in these urban areas, so they'll get natural defensive bonuses there. I mean, once they're knocked out of here, they have to fall back on something. But once they get back here, there's nothing for them to hide in, and the Russians should make quite heavy advances. It was saying that that Zelensky is going to go to Switzerland shortly because of pressure from the West to at least be present for talks of some form. But they're not going to give up or surrender, and they're going to continue fighting. The reasons that they gave for the failure of the spring offensive, to be quite honest, let me just jump into play mode, were actually almost perfect for me, from my point of view, for my analysis and opinions throughout, saying that they should have had some sort of D-Day moment or sort of Incheon moment, some massive effort. And the report said that their plan was to get to a Melitopol in like 2 days, which is 14 miles. And I thought, and I was going to build it. It's just I really don't have the time. But I was going to build that scenario, the road to Melitopol, and I think I might actually already have one, and I might sit down and just play it because I know they could have done it. They could have done it. You just have to think back, sort of the Iran-Iraq war and some of the Iranian offensives against the Iraqi lines, and how they just used 100,000 Pasadan to just charge these lines and made you know, they made um, breakthroughs of 2, 3, 4, 5 miles. And the problem with the front lines is there's only a Baghdad that didn't give the Iraqis a lot of grace. But the thing is, they said they didn't do anything like that. They chose instead. They had a plan actually to take Melitopol, a US plan, and right at the last moment they chose not to do it. So the Americans, this is what they're saying, because the Ukrainians wanted to focus on the other one. Is it Belaga? I can't remember the name of these places. Bakhmut, that's the one. I remembered it. I was going to look it up, but I remembered it. Bakhmut. So they wanted to focus on, because of its what it meant in the sort of psyche, if they could recapture it. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I'm just sitting there and I think, well, they could have taken Melitopol and it would have required every available resource, not everything, because obviously they still need to present a line of defense across the, line of contact or whatever. But I was sitting there thinking today that they could have had, instead of all these expensive tanks, they could have had loads and loads of just frameworks, almost like beach buggies, but just the wheels almost spaced out like an insect, and like a beach buggy with a very small sort of 1 litre engine that would have a whole range of armaments fitted onto it. But if they got they would be less likely to be damaged because there's nothing there to be damaged. Easy to repair, not that they really want to repair them, but you could actually swarm them because they would be cheap. For every tank, you could probably build 1,000 of these smaller vehicles, and you could attach them with these mine clearing things that they fire out and they explode and create a path, and all sorts of other things. With AI and swarms of these things with heavy cannons and 500 kilogram bombs loaded onto them, just sort of swarming, things like that. I was thinking today, but they could have just sent everything, and it would have been just a true and proper war zone with a lot of dead people, obviously. But the thing is, I think the article was saying that basically they chose a sort of to send in. This is what the article said. They chose to send in small squads of 10 men at a time, so that they didn't lose a lot of people. And it's that's just stupid because they all died. I mean, if you just send 10 men at a time against a fortified trench, they're going to fail. And quite often they jumped into the trenches and they had mines in them. And they made a little bit of ground, but we've all seen it as just pathetic and nothing. And it's they should have. I wonder what the American plan was, but they should have just sort of launched everything, because it's only 14 miles. You could, 100,000 men could sprint that in 2 or 3 hours. There would just be not enough bullets to shoot them all. Chaos ensues. You could have had airdrops. The Russians wouldn't have known whether they were shooting at their own or whether they were shooting at Ukrainians. It would just be true chaos. And in that chaos, they could have sought opportunity. Instead, they chose to be picked off piecemeal in the most embarrassing way ever. Because when it was building up, I was thinking, there's going to be some super plan here. This is involving the West. This is involving the US. There's just going to be this most thought out, intelligent, unbeatable plan of action that is just going to, because at that stage the Russians didn't look too good. I mean, although they retreated from the main areas that they captured right at the beginning, apparently that was because of the negotiations. It was agreed, and it was clear that they didn't push them back militarily. There was no way a military pushback. The Russians obviously agreed, and somehow chose to pull back as they did. So the whole idea that I can't remember what I was thinking about now. Got a total blank on what I was talking about. But the thing is, they could have done it. They could have got to Militopol, I think, and if they'd had, as I was talking about how I imagine that they would have this massive super plan that would be so carefully thought out, because you got, I mean, although this is just a war game, what you end up looking at is is odds, and Soviet doctrine used to be 17-1. I mean, the Ukrainian doctrine, what was that, 1-3? I mean, their doctrine, it's like, yeah, well, we're not going to win any of these. They did so many attacks that a few of them were bound to succeed, but 90% of them failed because they were going at 1-3 odds. And it's like they should have had that 20-1 roll. They should have had that 20-1 roll on Melitopol and won, and it would have been expensive. But that's what the point I was trying to get to. They were talking about how they were using small little groups of men, 10 at a time, and they were doing this to save lives. But apparently, the thing said overall, because of the failure, they lost more than if they'd done one big grand assault. And I don't think, I think it's I don't know. There's a Schwartz or Schwartz on war, and there's some writing about a general, and he was saying that war is never really that clever. When you're in a battle and you're in a position, the options that you got are really quite limited. Choosing one of the options is not an act of genius, because you only have one or two options. To choose to flank an enemy isn't necessarily an act of genius, because what else can you do? It's not really sort of one of 100 choices. It's one of 5. And I think that's being generous. One of 5, including running away. But anyway, so what we're trying to do here, to be quite honest, I'm just a bit too tired. Let's have a look. So we should be able to push these out. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that once they lose these cities, because they're in here, they'll be quite high and difficult to knock out. But once they get past here, they'll be easy to push back. I'm not sure where we got something that's easy. See, that's... So that's quite weak. There's only 2 there. We should be able to push these people back. I'm not using my artillery yet. So we only really need 2 units. There. So we should be able to push these back. So 2 of these units should be able to take out most units here. So what we're sort of looking at here is the sort of one of the sort of interesting features is they're all insurgents, so they're all on foot. So they're moving quite slowly. So we don't have the archetypal mobile warfare option here. I haven't included anything, mobile, just because this is what I'm sort of doing here at the moment. But what I am thinking is that Ukraine, I think the war is going to be over soon, because I think what's going to happen is that the Ukrainians will somehow fail in their defensive line somewhere, and the Russians will just exploit with proper mobile. Because this is what I've always said throughout the whole of it all. There's no demonstration of mobile warfare. It's like we're living in the First World War. I don't think it's necessarily quite like that, but it's the most embarrassing war that I thought could have possibly happened because neither side had demonstrated any sort of genius at all. It's just been a slogfest, all through from the very start, really. But I think that going forward, that the Russians are going to actually gain. It's like they were quite clever, really, in that they spent the whole of last year just holding their ground. The Ukrainians have spent their resources and are now basically being beaten back. It's now the Russians will now take the offensive. So people sort of think, oh, the Russians are afraid or they can't attack. The Ukrainians, I don't think, have much left. Especially when it comes down to manpower, which is what you need to actually, man defences. And I think, without any sort of victories, it's morale must be quite low. I mean, I don't think Zelensky commands leadership. I don't think really anyone really has a lot of faith in Zelensky. I think what they have faith in is the fact that the US are, supporting the war, and that is looking to fail. I think Europe, EU, has just pledged a lot more than they did last year, but it's only a drop in the ocean compared to what the US were providing. The article also said that the Ukrainians are now going to rely on their own armaments, and I think to some extent there's more to that than you could maybe imagine. If you just remember what I was saying about these sort of sand buggies, why spend whatever these tanks cost? I mean, they've just put their I don't know, these American tanks. They're sort of supposedly be really good. And every time I look on the news, there's another one being blown up. Because this is what I'm looking at here is an Abrams tank destroyed on the Ukrainian front lines. But the thing is, for the price of an Abrams tank, you could build, a lot of these, beach buggy type things for a very, very cheap price that can interchangeably mount intermediate weaponry systems. Like a a cannon, a 40mm cannon or something like that, 40mm cannon. Something comparable to sort of the armaments that an Abrams tank can deliver. I mean, yeah, they're very good at sort of automatically firing and hitting at things. But the thing is, what's there to fire at? There aren't any tanks. So, and I was thinking the other day, instead of tanks, just have an army of porties. You used to have porties in the Second World War, and they were just basically lorries with guns on the back, and you could have a lot more of those. It's just economics, and you wouldn't be so accurate. But there's no accuracy in this, So I think that the fact that the Ukrainians are going to build their own tanks is actually probably a good thing, and I don't even know why they're bothering building tanks. They might as well just leave all the armour off and stick in a remote drive in them so they can control them without a driver, and just a mobile gun, because that's all they're good for. A mobile gun that's going to get blown up within a matter of hours. These Abrams tanks are coming into the battlefield and they're being blown up within a matter of hours. What is its value? Its value is it enters the battlefield, delivers 10 rounds and gets blown up. You could do that a lot cheaper. And how effective are those 10 rounds? They probably weren't firing at anything in particular. So I think that the fact that they're building their own stuff, is interesting. But I just don't see the Ukrainians holding much further, because I mean, the whole point of being able to sustain a war is having a military-industrial complex, and that is just going to get blown up bit by bit. They're not even going to be able to, it's just little things like even being able to source metal, even being able to smelt it, even being able to, so many of these things rely on such intricate manufacturing processes that they're not going to be able to sustain any of that. And I think the Russians are just going to sweep across wherever they want, but I don't think they really want much. We've got 2 in there, so let's use some drones. See, I think the mine clearance thing could have been really, really simply done. I think there could have been a whole host of... I'm not even really looking. I don't even know what I'm talking about, really. I didn't mean to sort of... I just meant to fly. But I was just sort of feeling talkative, and I'm half asleep, so I don't really know what I'm saying. But it was interesting, really, what I read, and it basically stated that the Ukrainians don't have anything to fall back onto, and I don't really think that they're going to. I'm not sure these are going to be great odds. Oh, slap on the wrist. Okay. But I did a while back. And the thing is, I really want to do more of this game now. I really do. I want to just do something with it, even if it's just a case of writing more scenarios and spending more time writing and producing scenarios. The reason being, quite simply, is because I enjoy it, and did we fail there as well? What happened? I think they were there. That's where they were. Yeah, we were fighting into that. Yeah, because what happened the other day, I was looking at, because what I realised, I've not been to Reddit, the wargaming thing on Reddit, for years, and I thought, hang on, I used to go here, I used to go there, and it's sort of like, and I looked at it, and it's the same old crap. It's just such a terrible place. It's just full of a bunch of idiots talking a whole bunch of crap about a whole bunch of stupid things, stupid games. And someone was talking about online games, and I thought, oh yeah, well, I bet they haven't talked about my game. Of course they haven't. No one talks about my game. But I had these things, these links. Oh, we should try this one. We should try that one. There was one. It was called Panzer something, Panzer Armageddon or Panzer Conflict or something. It was online, and it was actually like one of these old world war games where the tanks go and the planes go and all the sound effects are there, and it just makes no sense whatsoever. And you're driving through, and all of a sudden you get surprised by a pillbox that in the middle of a field, like you couldn't see that. And it's so gamified because there's no fluid front line. You go from one objective to another, and it's very addictive. I played it once. I was up until like 6 o'clock in the morning because I wanted to finish it, and I've got the worst result ever. Apparently I was demoted, but begrudgingly I was allowed onto the next thing. That's because I didn't know how to play it. I didn't know how to refuel my planes. You've got to land them back at the airport to refuel them. And it's like, oh, that's stupid. So you've got all these bombers and things flying around, and they just fly around, and you got to, Anyway, I played it again the next day because I was determined to do better, and I didn't do any better at all, actually. I messed up on a couple of things, but I actually managed to do a few things better. I played it better generally because I knew what I wanted to do, but the point is, it just wasted so much of my time. And I thought, Jesus Christ, I just played this till. So I went to bed really late. That got me up late next day, and then in the day I played it. After I finished doing my work and stuff, I started to play it. I thought I'll just get through this and see how it works. So in the end, I've got this thing called, you can't see it here, but site block. There you go. A number of active filters 6. I added it to that, so I can't go there. But it just reminded me how crap those games are. They're just rubbish. The thing with Warblog, it's not addictive in any way. We can exploit now. You see, this is the whole point. Oh no, you can't exploit. We can move into there though. That'll teach them a lesson. Let's get some drones into here. But I really dislike those games, and it made me realise that this is a serious option. And why are none of these people thinking they're playing Warblock? Why? Because they all want an AI, and they're all talking about, oh, the AI, here it's good and here. They can't play on their own. They can't do both sides. Why? It's like, these are fantastic scenarios that allow you to think. And I moved them this turn, didn't I? Let's go for it. But what I want to do is to actually push them out. What I want to do is to do more work on it and to have another look at both just getting more out of it for myself, but B, taking another look at the simulation side of it. So maybe looking at things to add supply rules so that you can't just go on forever. So these units probably only have enough for 5 assaults or 3 assaults. They can assault 3 times. You can't just keep planning on just attacking. You then got to sort of somehow consider putting them back into supply. The big problem with supply that I've got is that I find it very difficult to trace routes, to a certain point. For example, if I was doing this, it's very difficult for me to actually write some code that tells me whether or not this route exists, because you've got to go around. So these ones would be straight out, and then I would go here. It would be an error, but then it's difficult because basically I've got to exclude this, so this would be the only option, and I've got to do all around again. But then I wouldn't necessarily know whether or not I was going backwards or forwards. It's difficult. I'm pretty sure I could do it, but I'm pretty sure that it would blow my mind, because I know that these hex things are actually all done wrong, in the sense that I've made it the difficult way mathematically rather than the easier way. But the thing is, calculating a line, so calculating that line there would be quite difficult for me. I'm pretty sure there would be some logical way. Obviously, I would say I can't go back to where I was, but what would stop me from looking at that one? The only thing that would be stopping me would be the fact that it's in a zone of control. So the next 2 options would be these 2, and then it's sort of it's complicated. But the thing is, I'd like to do that, and I'd like to then start basically just getting more out of it for me, adding a bit more in the way of making it a more interesting game from that point of view. I don't like doing that because it's a game and I just like moving the counters around, really. But I think, to be quite honest, I'd like to sort of take it to the next level and have that as an option. I was thinking of putting, advance, toggle, so you can toggle it on and off. Because what I was thinking of doing was, where you basically run out of ammunition, or you've got to keep replenishing yourself. So like we've got there, we've got depression factors. So on this one, he's depression factor 4. He would have a supply factor, and that supply factor would be, would say how much he's got left. So it might take, to do an assault might take 2 supply units. To defend would take 1. So you could defend for a lot longer than you can attack, etc. And then to replenish, you've then got to somehow do that either automatically or manually. But then that would leave you in a situation where the game would be over by the fact that you were out of ammunition. You didn't have the resources to continue the impulse. And I think that's quite reasonable, really. And then you start to look at it and think, well, okay, one thing is, for example, they're pushing back. This is Adveeka is over here, and this is where they're pushing. They've taken that place, they've taken this, and they've taken this. They haven't taken this place here yet. So the fact that they can take these doesn't mean they can necessarily just walked off across here, because they're probably out of out of supply. They need to regroup, and and basically resupply after that. So they can only do certain things at a time. Um, and I'd like to sort of reflect that. But the third thing, so doing it for myself, making it a bit better, to actually make it more commercially viable. Not commercially viable, but I don't really know because I haven't even thought about it. I was just thinking sort of about this today. But what I'm really sort of thinking about and getting to is the actual interface for, say, people spending money to play the game. Maybe to provide something that makes it feel a lot more like they're purchasing a product, a bit more sort of customer follow up. Basically, because I'm insulted by the fact that these people are still peddling these crappy games with these crappy AIs, and I just feel like I'd really like to sort of say, listen, you want to play a game that allows you to think, in this way, because I was playing that game and I wasn't thinking. I just knew what I was doing. It was like a mechanical thing. I was just saying, oh, it's my turn, and then I was just looking at what I've got, and I was just moving the tanks over. There's nothing. For example, you can only have one unit in one hex at a time. There's no stacking in the game, and so what you can get there, it really doesn't isn't important. It's not important that you've got infantry with tank support. The tanks just attack. You've got light tanks, heavy tanks. You've got a porty system or infantry or motorbikes. They just attack. You can't combine them. It doesn't seem like there's any sort of real benefit. Maybe there is, because I noticed that my motorbikes attacked cavalry in town. They got wiped out. I wasn't expecting that. But I think that the whole idea is you're supposed to think. That's the thing, and I'd like to maybe push the game so that I can encourage a bit more of that. I don't know whether I should attack that place because look, I don't know. I'm just too tired. Just been warbling on. And another part of what I maybe want to do is, I didn't even look at the odds where they would beat them, but I'll leave it at that. We'll go on to the Ukrainian turn. The reason I want to do the Ukrainian turn, just quickly, they haven't got any air things here, is because what I want to sort of demonstrate is, not absolutely, but in part, that they do have counter-attack capability. For example, here they could probably knock this stack back. They could probably even knock this stack back. But there's 4 in there, so let's use our artillery on here and see what we can do. But they are playing a defensive role here, and they are playing a defensive role now in the Ukraine. To attack needs incredible resources, and they wasted all their resources. This could be a 4-1, 5-1. What I'm sort of getting to is we can drive them back. Now this is a difficult one because there's 2 of them and they're in light urban, and I can't even remember what the odds are, but what we're playing here is defensive, so rolling back and defensive, and it's actually not easy to defend in agricultural land. one of the big deterrents with the agricultural offensive going over the agricultural land is that it's very easy for them to be saturated with mines. And again, we're all aware that they can do air deploy mines. They just fire them off from artillery system, from 20 miles away. That all depends on that you've got those systems. To sort of saturate all of this agricultural land, all of it, they just don't have the resources. So they'll only be able to do a little bit here. What's the one here? One line, and I think this is something that was an observation of the way the Ukrainians do it and the Russians do it. The Ukrainians would do a very dense one line, whereas the Russians would do a lighter line and a lighter line and a lighter line. So the same number, but deployed lighter over a greater area. Whereas the Ukrainians are doing very heavily dense one line. So once you get through it, you're through. But I think this nature of how they're going to fall back and how readily the Russians can move on that is going to be key. And I think one of the things that is something worth bearing in mind, this spring offensive was so hyped up and it was such a colossal failure, but it was so hyped up, and it was the spring offensive when the ground is good. Well, what we got here quite clearly is the Russians doing a spring offensive, and it's not even spring yet. They've been doing it's winter. They did it in February. They were working in January and February, and they look like they're going to be doing their own spring offensive. So, and they did comment that the delays in the weapon systems arriving in Ukraine caused the spring offensive to not start until the summer, and it allowed the Russians to build their superior, super duper defenses. I think there's some ground in there, but I don't really think there's a lot of ground. That they had defenses, whether they were super duper and any better by the summer, I don't know. I mean, it gave them more time to lay mines, maybe. But I think the big problem was that they just, because that's what I was actually thinking the other day. What I'd really like now is a book. Someone must have written a book on it, the Idiot's Guide to the Ukraine War, and then page after page of all the strategic battles and what happened and why these things happened and why decisions were made. Maybe someone's already written a book, because I know these people sort of tend to write books even before the thing's finished. But it'd be interesting to see exactly what decisions were made. But I think the failure to actually have a grand assault, a grand Incheon moment, a D-Day event was what brought this war to probably the inevitable conclusion that it's going to end up at. Because the thing is, if they had done that and they were in Melitopol, they would have such a boost in morale, even if it was. Because the thing is, the Russians, offensive actions are actually quite difficult to do, and even the Russians are having problems with that. So I don't think it's fair to say that they would have failed. But if they could have got into Melitopol, using hand gliders. I mean, when Hamas entered Israel in hand gliders, I just looked at that and I thought this is what they should have been doing in Ukraine. You could use those hand gliders to get over the minefields, and all you would need is a squadron of, surely they could have got 100 hand gliders to do a sort of a special operation mission to get to capture certain key points. Because the thing is, 100 men heavily armed, are going to be a problem. Especially if they can land somewhere and capture heavy weapons. If they could land somewhere in their hand gliders and capture a Russian base. But even other things like gliders, like they did in Market Garden, just landing in gliders of commercial planes, and they had some sort of airlift capability. It should have happened all at once. Massive assault, and they didn't. But if they had Melitopol, my point is, they would have been able to sit here in 2024 with at least some moral superiority. The fact that they had the ability, they had the resources, and they just pissed it away 10 men at a time against an unbreakable wall. and they got nowhere. And I do want to set the Melitopol thing up and actually play it with like hundreds of units and just to show that the sheer volume of it could have been done. And it's, oh no, but people would have died. Well, what's the point of war if you can't face people dying? You need to win, and the Ukrainians could have done that because they had so much stuff given to them. I think they had like three 3 or 4 years the United States national defense budget all in one go. Um, the pictures of all these tanks being blown up is just painful to watch. One little artillery system at a time, hidden in a hedgerow. Because the thing is, if they'd done a ground assault, the Russians would have run out of their drones, because they probably only had a certain amount, and they would have only had a certain amount at any given place on the front line. And especially at the very start, they didn't have very good drones. I mean, the ones that we've got for the Russians at the moment, I can't even remember what they are. They're actually new. They were developed in the summer, and they've gotten better. And secondly, I think another thing that I've been thinking about is some sort of AA system. So you'd have these masses and masses of troops, but there would be troops there that would be, their sole role would be clearing the roads. Whenever a tank got blown up, it would be mechanical engineers. They would be hauling these tanks off the road and keeping them clear, keeping them open. And there would be AA Overwatch. And they, how difficult can it be to either have AI supported, computer supported anti-AA systems? I'm talking anti-aircraft, anti-drone, with automated shotgun capability. So you're firing a shotgun that's good for sort of like 200 yards, and something like that can take out some of these inbound drones quite easily, because they're not moving at supersonic speeds. They're probably not moving very fast at all. They're probably moving at about 80 to 120 miles per hour. I'm not even sure how fast these drones are moving. But something like that, if you had a very clear system with shotgun capabilities, because shotguns are really powerful at that range, especially when your target is moving so fast. Even just a couple of pellets would just go straight through the internals and make it, completely neutralize it. Even if it didn't blow up, it would just, lose the ability to control itself. And you could do that stuff, and you could probably protect yourself from 90% of all the inbound drones on the battlefield, because they all have the same requirement. They've got to approach the target. And if you've got all these sorts of, and it's just shotguns, just a bunch of old men with shotguns, looking out and constantly trying to find drones to shoot at, but also automated systems. They could have done it. But so we can do this attack here. Let's just do it. Oh no, hang on. I know we've used all our artillery. So the thing is, if we had drones, it'd be better, but we don't. But anyway, let's just see what we can do. So some bloody fighting. Oh well. Well, we'll definitely see. We'll lose our entrenchments there. Okay, so it's definitely defensive. That's it, the Lancets. I mean, they were using the Kubla, and I think I don't know if you interested. Just got it. But those are the first ones I started to use, and I think they might be Iranian. But these Kubla were sort of, have about 5 or 6 of them. They were suicide drones on a rack, and they would just, launch them one after the other. But the Lancet has got sort of 3 types of munitions, high explosives and something else, and quite a serious anti-tank system that sort of, as the drone approaches the target, then it actually super ejects itself in a hot bolt of hot lava hot molten metal that just burns its way through the hull of a tank and then explodes, etc., etc. type thing. But the Lancet was apparently pretty useful. But the thing is, over the course of that year, 2023, they improved their systems. But even the Lancet, you can see it approaching. In the videos, you can see it approaching, which means that you can have some automated system to shoot it with a shotgun. I mean, you're not trying to shoot it with bullets. You're trying to shoot it with a shotgun with a wild field of range. So I find it difficult to believe that with all the Western ingenuity that they've not been able to sort of, because if you were to, this is why I think that the Russians have been using a lot of artillery and rocket fire and glided bombs, because they don't want to become too dependent on drones, because I think that at some point they're going to have a very good way of preventing any radio frequency and i.e. drone activity on the battlefield. I don't think drones are the future. Another thing I was thinking about with my beach buggy type um, attack vehicles is that for in particular for taking out minefields, because what they fire a rope, and the rope has got explosives in it, and then it explodes, clearing a line. But the thing is, you've only got so many of those, but you could restock them with drones, and you could have these drones that fly in. You can have swarms of drones, like 1,000 drones, just all over the battlefield, going to and fro, restocking these things with ammunition or anti-mine, mine clearance systems, just automatically mounting up, reloading, and then flying off for more supplies. This entire robotic sort of front line. You would have thought that all these GE avionics and Raytheon systems and would have been doing all of that, and all they seem to be doing is sending Abram tanks in to be selected for targeting. There's been no sort of massive change. Wouldn't surprise me if they were thinking about it, but they must have done something. It seems that they're willingly not trying. So anyway, it's the Russian turn, and I've just talked a load of crap for 47 minutes. So we're pushing forward. See, that's where they want to be. Moved out of there. Which is a mistake. Seven point two, 2.2.7, 7.2, and 2. But when we fire these drones in there, hang on, there. When we fire these drones in there, they'll have a morale check for sure. So one of these will probably rout this turn. Nope. What is that? Right, well, we routed that one, and he 3.7. That was a pretty wasteful process, but I'm so tired. I just want to go to sleep. I'm not really thinking at all. I should have just said, I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to play this game. Because I wanted to just walk in there. Right, I'm going to be adventurous. I think we should be able to take it. I'm like that. He's defending on 9.6 because he's in urban, you see. This is the point I'm trying to make. It's difficult to get them out of urban. Three 1-to-1s. Oh, that's sort of, you see, I thought that'd be a walkover. And then we could take these out because these would be easy. They're in the open. I mean, look, there's a stack of 4 just to sort of give it an idea of how easy this should be. I'm just going to attack it. I mean, I don't even need. I'm just going to choose everyone. But I think I could have done it with 3. 7-to-1, 10-to-1 odds there. But because they're in the city, see, that's the sort of point I was trying to make with this. Because it's going to be a heavy battle, but he's on his own and we couldn't get it with drones and artillery. But this 4 stack, we just completely wiped it out because they're in the middle of nowhere. They're in the fields. But once they get past these towns, there's nowhere to hide. And the thing is, eastern Ukraine is the industrialized area. That's where the places like Mariupol, big industrial area, Bakhmut, I think, is industrial, but Adveeka is definitely industrial. These things are really big, places. Whereas the West, I believe, is more agricultural. There aren't so many big cities. All the big industrial areas, all their industry um, is in the east, and most of the west is the agricultural area. Um, and so that's one of the problems that Ukraine has because they're losing the bulk of their, industrial economy to, to this war. But the thing is, technically, they're losing all their defensive options. There's no defensive options past Orlivka, and that was the reason for sort of doing this. I'm going to sort of leave it at that. No one ever watches my videos, so I never feel too bad, and not even I watch them. I do actually watch them, to be quite honest, when I'm going to sleep. But the thing is, I only really like to watch them when I'm moving the counters around. That's why I sort of just sit there moving the counters around. But I think I can safely say I haven't moved any counters around. Let's see what else we can do because we've got a few minutes. Should be able to knock these people out. If we do it too, we'll get a 10% bonus for the flank. Exchange. At this rate, oh look, see, this is we can't do that. They're in built up there. Look, push them back at least. See, once they're out of their defences, they are easily pushed back. So look, 15-3, just pushing them back. There's no way they're going to have to go into one of these cities now. there's these interesting little lake things that are sort of a little interesting. We won't do anything there. 5 minutes left. Exchange. I should have just shut up and just played. Because it's an interesting scenario, and I wanted to see whether or not, I figured that what would happen is that it would demonstrate that the Russians can easily push the Ukrainians back through the agricultural terrain, but it's with the cities where they get held up. And it's not just the agricultural terrain. There's no, I could have gone in and put a trench line all along here. I could have put landmines and barbed wire, earthworks and things. But I didn't. There's nothing because they haven't had the time to do that. And I'm pretty sure they must have had some things. They've probably got defensive features here and there, but nothing sort of, so large that it's really going to affect any Russian advance. So I think that basically the Russians are just going to pour through. They're going to get sort of breakthrough after breakthrough. They're going to be conquering little town, little village after one after the other. That's my prediction. I think it's all over for Ukraine now. What they were said in that article I mentioned a couple of minutes, that they were going to they stopped their proper daily assaults because it was expensive on ammunition and vehicles and all sorts, and they were focusing more on long range actions. And they cited the air attack on Moscow as though that was some strategic victory. They said, when their missiles got through to Moscow, it really sort of sent the message to the Russian high command that they were not safe anywhere. And that is such a load of crap, because it was just a one-off little thing. Of course they're going to expect something like that. It was more, everything they've been doing seems to be for Twitter, so they can have some sort of a little shot of a little drone breaking some tiles on the roof of the Kremlin. Wow. The bridge, the Crimea Bridge, I think is another thing. Sinking the fleet is also, 50% of the Black Sea fleet has been sort of, put out of business, so to speak. So, those things are significant, but you're not going to win the war doing that. The Russians are just going to get, closer and closer, and you won't actually have any of the country left to be able to do that from. And it requires quite an industrial, military industrial complex to do that, and they're not making those themselves. So, it's a stupid strategy. It's not a real strategy. It's just one of these other excuses for why the Ukrainians are doing so well, and why it might be a game changer. It's not. The only game changer that they had is the option to get to Melitopol, which they could have done. If they'd done that, if they'd done Melitopol, if they'd done that, this year they could have been in a very strong position for asking for exactly the same again. But now they just fished it all off, and they're not really given that opportunity again. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, and I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.